Welcome to this episode of the Smart Leaders Sell podcast. I'm Jessica Lorimer, sales coach and leadership expert, and I am really excited to dig down into today's episode. Hey there, poddies. 15th of June. I'm hoping for sunshine. I'm assuming that the British summertime will be over by this point. Very cynical about weather in the UK. More cynical perhaps since I've got an allotment. I've realised that there is basically no way to know when it's going to rain other than when it's actually raining on me. I know that there are other people out there who they have this kind of weird sense of, I don't know, I was going to say rain direction, but I don't think that's a thing. But they can predict the rain. Lots of people tell me they can smell rain or they can just feel it. If any of you guys could just send that, prediction ability over to me, that would be great, because at the time of recording this, I've been rained on about 4 times this week, walking to my allotment, walking back from the allotment, and, just being on the allotment in general. And I have to say that gardening is not a natural talent of mine. And so it can be quite frustrating at times. So when it rains on me as well, I'm just sort of like doubly hacked off at having to weed constantly. Having said that, loving the allotment, picked my first strawberries recently, picked my first radishes recently. So for any of those of you who are actually interested in my allotment journey, it's going surprisingly well. I have to be honest, I'm not top notch at growing anything. But my 80-year-old allotment friends are all very, very helpful and shout regular advice at me. Mainly how I'm doing things wrong, but somehow my stuff is surviving. And I do honestly think that that's because I've just kind of put it in the ground and expected that it will live. And that seems to be working. So if anyone's struggling with gardening, that's my top bit of advice. Assume that plants want to survive and throw them in the ground and just, put some plant food on them. They'll probably be fine. This is why I don't have a plant podcast, isn't it? So today I want to talk about how you can be asking for the sale. And there are a few reasons for this. One is that we go through points in the year when the same or similar questions come up quite regularly. And we are at this point in the year where people are not feeling great about sales in general. That usually ties in with summer. And usually it's because we're starting to wind down. We're starting to get into almost holiday mode or pre-holiday mode and thinking about what we're going to be doing in the summer holidays when people have got children home, all that kind of thing. Obviously, this year is slightly different. And we've been in this kind of wonky environment for, by this time, be 12 or so weeks, I think, by the time this episode goes out. And so we're coming to the same point in the year. People are having the same feelings. And also we're getting a lot of questions about how people can convert more calls and how people can make more sales. And usually the way that we talk about sales calls is that people say they worry about asking for the sale. They don't really know how to do it. It feels awkward. It feels unnatural. However, I don't really believe that it's totally your job on the sales call to ask for the sale anyway. Perhaps controversially, it depends on who else you follow when it comes to sales advice. But I want to make sure that everybody's running their sales calls in the right way, because obviously there are lots and lots of different things going on at the moment. And that makes it quite difficult to sell. It means that we're probably having fewer sales calls than normal. And it means that it's more important than ever to convert those calls into clients. Now, a lot of people find this process quite difficult. So if you're somebody who is kind of thinking, oh my goodness, I really hate sales calls, or you're somebody who gets on a sales call and perhaps you work in quite a sensitive niche mindset or health and well-being or fertility or anything like that, and you're seeing your sales calls have a certain trajectory and it's not actually to sales, it's more about supporting them through trauma, the calls are quite emotionally charged, we're getting sucked into the story versus actually providing that person with the clarity on the sales call to make a decision. Or, your calls are feeling like casual chats and they're not actually going anywhere. So it's taking a lot of time for you. Maybe you eventually convert the prospect into a client, but it's taking quite a lot of time. It's taking quite a lot of effort and it's a lot of back and forth rather than just having the call and getting it sorted. Then this episode is for you. I will also remind you that if you are somebody who wants to learn more about sales calls outside of this episode and what you can do differently on sales calls, then there are a couple of supplementary resources that you can take a look at. One, obviously, is the podcast episode, the first ever Smart Leaders Sell episode that I did 2.5 years ago now, called Never Hear Another No on a Sales Call. It's consistently the top listened episode out of all of the episodes that I've ever put on. Clearly, it's something that people are interested in time and again. And obviously, you can get my sales scripts and objection handling guides trainings. So if you want to grab those, the links are in the show notes. That walks you through every type of question that you need to ask, the exact phases of the discovery call, how you can make sales calls work for you in a way that feels good. So if you want to be able to handle objections better, if you want to be able to navigate sales calls in a more confident and competent way, then make sure that you do go and pick up that training. The link will be in the show notes. It is very good. Also, I look incredibly young. I'm going to be honest, when I recorded that training, I looked phenomenal. So, it's worth it just to see my youthful... I don't know how I was going to end that phrase, but anyway, I look really young. The training is really good. People have signed their first ever clients on it, made their first 5K sales on it, and they are loving the results that it gets them. So let's dig into this then. If asking for the sale feels unnatural or awkward to you on a sales call, we have to actually troubleshoot why you are having to ask for that sales piece in the first place. Okay. Now, I want to explain this. A lot of the time when we are consuming sales training and sales information, what we're being told is perfect your pitch, get your one-liner ready, understand how you can hammer home all of the features of what you sell. And I don't think any of that works. In fact, I know those things don't work because I work with clients who've genuinely spent a lot of time perfecting those things and trying those things and then practicing them and they don't convert. So it's always interesting to me that we see when we talk about sales, when we talk about sales calls and trainings around sales calls, it's always interesting that we're still coming from this place of push and pull. Okay. So what we're traditionally taught with sales training is that we should push. We need to be pushing for the sale. We need to be pushing away objections. We need to be pushing the person into making the decision there and then. And when we talk about that, and when we talk about how that actually feels, obviously it feels sleazy. Obviously it feels like we're trying to corral people into making a decision that may or may not be the best fit for them right now. But it's also interesting because people assume that that's how salespeople across the world are selling on the regular. And it really isn't. Perhaps one of the tips or one of the secrets that salespeople haven't been sharing over the last few years is that actually they already know this doesn't work. So a lot of them have already stopped doing this. They stopped doing it 20, 30 years ago when they realized that after, Wolf of Wall Street happened, that probably wasn't the best way to go. So it amazes me, particularly in the online space, why we see this, because everybody talks regularly about the fact that sales might feel sleazy, sales might feel gross, sales feels pushy, blah, blah, blah. And yet apparently they're still doing it the same way. That doesn't make sense, right? And I think it's Einstein who defines doing the same action multiple times and expecting a different result as being the definition of insanity. So then we have to look at, okay, why do we do it this way? How can we do it differently? And if we do it differently, what kind of result can we expect? So I want to talk to you about, just before we kind of dig into the how of doing it differently, I want to talk to you about one of my clients. Her name is Sarah. Sarah is amazing. She is the creator and founder of the Fab Fertile method. Sarah works in the fertility space. She is known for incredible work. She works with couples who have really challenging fertility issues. So she works with couples that are hard cases when it comes to helping them get pregnant naturally and without the use of IVF. So she works with clients that have conditions like PCOS, low ovarian reserve, have had multiple IUIs, multiple rounds of IVF in some cases, and that they haven't been able to get pregnant, and they now need to understand, why that is, and ultimately do the digging around how they can best get pregnant. I I love Sarah. I love working with Sarah. Despite being somebody that does not want children myself, I probably know more about fertility than the average human being. I have some incredible fertility clients. And one of the reasons that I love working with Sarah is that A, she's really, really committed to her clients. She genuinely wants them to get the best results possible. She wants them to have babies. And she's very, very good at what she does. But two, she's dedicated to her own business, and she practices and she implements, and she doesn't ever whine, right? And that's really interesting to me because I've worked with Sarah for, 3 years now. In fact, she's been in my mastermind for the last 2 years. And Sarah is phenomenal in that she never moans. She just takes feedback. She just does the work. She implements it. And then she sees the results. And that's been huge because over the last 3 years, I've watched Sarah go from raising her prices. She is not the cheapest in the fertility market, and she shouldn't be because she's phenomenal at what she does. She provides this excellent service. She's integrated new people onto her team. She has helped, honestly, hundreds of people get pregnant naturally, which has been awesome. And she has been growing her business steadily, regularly, and consistently for the last 3 years that I've worked with her. Now, when Sarah initially came to me, she was selling her services at a much cheaper rate. And, one of her biggest bugbears was sales calls. And we used to talk about it because Sarah is one of those people. She's very direct. She's very transparent. She's really good fun. She's very understanding with her clients. She takes a lot of time. But she works in an industry that is very, very emotionally charged. And so one of the things that she used to say to me was, she'd have these sales calls and actually they'd be quite draining for her and for the client or the prospect, I'd imagine, because people would really dig into the pain, why they weren't pregnant yet, how awful their journey had been so far, how they were struggling, And that's not easy on a sales call. It's not easy for the prospect to relive the trauma and the pain and feel the raw emotions. And it's not easy for the person managing the sales call either. If everyone gets on a sales call with you and cries, that doesn't set your day up for the biggest of successes, right? I realize I'm saying this and I'm like, that must sound really heartless, but it's true. It doesn't help them and it doesn't help you. And so Sarah came to me and we worked on her discovery calls, and we've been working on them on and off for 3 years. Every time, we want to make changes, we go back and we troubleshoot and we look at what can we make better? How can we convert higher? And Sarah's gone from, and I won't share her exact stats. That's Sarah's, that's up to her to share. But Sarah's increased her sales call conversion rate by over 60%. That's huge, right? And I think that's really important to acknowledge, not just because Sarah's a hero who's made that happen through hard work and implementation and practice, but also because a lot of the time we can often think, oh, well, it's easy for that person. It's easy for them. They haven't had to work for it. They've got all of this other stuff that must make their life easy. And Sarah is a leader in her space. She's got a phenomenal podcast. She regularly interviews some of the best and, most interesting guests around. She has a large following. She's got a great email list. But her sales are made through her sales calls. And so for her to have to practice them consistently, troubleshoot them regularly, she doesn't sit there and sit on her laurels when things are going right. She's not like, oh, well, cool, I've nailed this and I'll never go back and look at anything again. She's always thinking, how can I get better at this? How can I do these better? How can I troubleshoot these? We talk about it a lot. Even though she's really good at them, we talk about it a lot. And so I want you to understand that, before we even talk about how to do it better, it's not about learning how to do it better so you can do it once. This has got to be something you practice consistently. It's got to be something that you do well consistently. It's got to be something you commit to. It's not like, well, there's nothing in life that you can do. You can't just go to the gym once and be like, oh, I'd love to be thin, please. A side note, wish that would happen. I'm like, I am so done with exercising. I just want to eat pizza and, somehow still remain a size 8. Like, if anyone can make that happen for me, please just let me know. I'll buy anything. But this is the thing. getting to a point in your business where consistent sales happen, where sales calls become easy, is not about doing one great sales call and then expecting the rest to be like that. It is about this consistent practice. It's about consistently implementing. And from the perspective of Sarah, she's doing 5 to 10 of these calls a week, right? Her audience love these calls. She's doing everything right. She's consistently tweaking them. She's consistently troubleshooting. She's consistently practicing. She's consistently booking them, and she's consistently converting them. You know, that is something that we have to celebrate. Consistency is dull, but consistency brings cash. So let's talk about how we can start to troubleshoot where exactly our sales calls go wrong in terms of us having to ask for the sale. Because the reality is that most people show up to your calls 90% sold, right? If somebody is spending time out of their day with you and they're talking about your services, it's quite likely they already want to buy. And so the questions then become a lot simpler. It's, you know, I'm talking to Jess. Do I still like her as a person? Does she come across the same on the phone and with her services as she does on her podcast or on her email list? Or, you know, I want to talk to this person specifically about their services to see what they'd recommend for me personally. Or I want to check if the price range is right. Those questions are a lot simpler. And most people will arrive on sales calls in that state. They like you, they know you, they trust you, they want what you have to sell. So how exactly are we unselling them? Like, how are we getting them onto a sales call where they are 90% sold and then turning them off, right? There are a couple of things here. One is, do they even know it's a sales call? So we can only have people that show up to sales calls 90% sold if they know that this is a sales call. If they know that the expectation is that you are going to talk about your services in relation to their problems and how your services might help. A lot of people are scared to advertise their sales calls as sales calls, right? By the way, if you call your calls discovery calls or sales calls or whatever you want to call them, it's fine. It doesn't matter. We have to, though, let people know that these calls ultimately they're going to be sold on them, or they're going to be sold to, or you're probably going to mention your services at some point. And we have to do that for a couple of reasons. One, because it's transparent and we want to be transparent. And two, because if we get people on a call that they don't know is a sales call, we miss out on the fact that they are a warmer and more qualified lead. And so we have to work a lot harder. Okay. So you might have fewer calls if you actually start talking about what happens on your calls and you start talking honestly and openly about the fact that these calls are for people who genuinely are interested in working with you. But the people that you get on the calls will be people who actually are interested and already invested in working with you and just want to find out the key details. Okay. So when we're promoting these calls, it's really important to think about, are we being upfront and honest with people about what these calls are, what they mean? You know, are we explaining to people what they will get from the call, even if they don't buy, right? Because a sales call is a powerful thing. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But a sales call is a really powerful opportunity for a prospect. It's also a really empowering opportunity for a prospect if it's run in the correct way. So we have to be upfront and honest when we're promoting these calls. We have to be transparent that these are not just sessions for people to moan about their current situation. They're not sessions for people to have a quick coffee and pick your brains like for free. That's not it either. We have to be very, very clear. These calls are to discuss their problems and potential solutions. Okay. The other thing that we have to think about when we think about this idea of how we unselling them on the call is, are we making the call too easy for them? Right. And again, we're going to talk about the actual call in a sec, but are we using justification words saying, oh, well, you know, I just do this, or I just help you with that, or you kind of need some tweaks, or maybe you could just look at this. If we start doing that, it makes people think that solving their problem is actually a lot easier than it is. Now, solving their problem for us as experts is easy. It can be relatively simple. We can look at it and say, yes, I know exactly how to do that, or I know where you're struggling, and you know, I can make key recommendations, and we should be able to sort that problem with you relatively easily. However, For that person, they shouldn't leave your call thinking, oh yeah, well, Jess was just so blasé about it that it's probably not that difficult to fix myself. Again, for a couple of reasons. One is because if they think it's so easy, they're going to go away and try and do it themselves, which stops you getting the sale. And the second thing is that when they go away and try and do it themselves and they realize it's not that easy, who are they going to blame? Because it's not going to be themselves. They're not going to look at it and go, well, I don't know what I don't know, but it's my fault because I should have invested in expert help. They're going to go, wow, Jess told me it was really easy and simple to fix, and it wasn't. So she's a liar, right? That's how human nature works. So we want to make it clear to people when we're on these calls, we're not justifying our prices. We're not saying to them that they have a really easy problem to solve and that it's also simple and that, they just have to do X, Y, and Z. We have to be very honest with them about the process and about why they need support doing that. Okay. Now that brings me on to the next point around, if we keep looking at this being our baseline question, how are we unselling then? The second piece to this is, are they actually gaining any clarity on this call? So like I was saying earlier, sales calls can be really, really powerful if they're run correctly. And that is always the caveat. But a lot of people don't run sales calls correctly because they either don't know how to, or they find that it might be uncomfortable, or they feel like, it's, in the case of my advice, different from what they've learned previously. So they're not going to do it in the way that, is this new and non-exciting way to run them, right? As humans, we try and avoid uncomfortable situations. We avoid discomfort at all costs. That doesn't always set us up in the correct way to run a decent sales call, because unfortunately, prospective clients are usually on the sales call because they are in a state of discomfort. So if we spend the entire sales call trying to alleviate that discomfort, what happens? Well, they leave the sales call feeling really good, but not buying anything because they're not in pain anymore. And again, like we were just talking about, if they leave the sales call not in pain, they go, oh, well, then it's all fine. Everything is great. And I don't need to worry about it. I'm just going to go and do my thing. And then in 2 weeks' time, when the pain comes back, because it's very difficult for anyone to troubleshoot their own issues and then support themselves and keep themselves accountable to implementing differently, then they blame you. Or they think your method isn't that simple or whatever, because it didn't work for them, because they didn't have the right support, because it didn't work out in the way that they expected. None of these things are your fault. None of these things are the prospect's fault. It's just what happens. So we have to make sure that these calls don't feel inherently awkward and sleazy, but that they also don't remove pain for the prospect. Because in order for the prospect to decide to make a decision, they have to be in a really open place and understand what their problems are. It doesn't mean we have to make them cry on the call and that they should be feeling incredibly awful by the time that the call finishes. That's not the case. But we do have to understand that they're in pain. We have to empathize with the fact they're in pain. And we also cannot remove that. We don't have that privilege yet. If somebody hasn't signed a contract to work with you, we can't remove their pain because we're not responsible for coaching them yet. And actually, if we remove their pain, it could cause them later damage because they haven't solved the issues in the correct way, right? So just think about this. When it comes to these calls, even if somebody doesn't buy, they should walk away from the call understanding what their problem actually is and what the key action points are for them to address that. They should have a sense of clarity. Clarity is really powerful for people. And most people will come to a sales call and they will assume that they know all the answers. And they'll go, people tell me this all the time. They're like, Jess, I just need help with this bit. And I'm like, okay, cool. And it's not until we actually start talking about it on the call, until we start asking questions, until we start moving through the phases, that the person is able to self-identify and go, oh, yeah, that might not actually be my problem, mightn't it? I'm like, no, that's not your problem. At the point the person understands that maybe their problem isn't the initial one that they thought it was, they're much more open to learning about a solution, right? But they also have this sense of clarity that you gave them. through the questions that you ask, through the way that you phrase things, through the phases that you used on that call, they feel supported. They have gained clarity. Even if they don't buy at that point, they're going to rave about you. Not because you gave them a ton of answers, not because you told them what to do, not because you gave them free coaching, but because you gave them something else that's far more powerful and far more rare. You gave them the ability to self-identify what their problem was, to understand it, and the ability to then choose and be empowered to either proceed, move forward, learn more, get a solution, or not. Either is fine. Okay. So on that call, how do we help them gain clarity, especially without free coaching? This is the interesting thing, isn't it? So most people think that delivering value is about giving somebody a load of information and hoping that they know what to do with that after the call has finished. Again, I don't subscribe to this methodology. People have never paid for information. They pay for implementation. But also, if we give somebody a load of information, sometimes we can inadvertently make them feel stupid. Because when we give somebody a load of information and they go away and they can't implement it, they get frustrated. And it becomes the information's fault. And you, as the source of that information, it becomes your fault. So rather than using information to help somebody gain clarity, we actually have to use questioning. We have to help them self-identify. Yes, they have a problem. Yes, this is the area that the problem is in. Yes or no, do I want to solve that problem? Yeah. And we do that through being transparent, through having these transparent sales calls. So the first thing that we always need to do is set the agenda and make sure that people understand how the sales call is going to run. People love boundaries. As one of my clients, Emma Langton, the boundary queen, will tell you, people feel safe and reassured when they understand what's going to happen and when. We can often feel uncomfortable about sales calls because people are like, I don't want to ask, questions. I don't want to be insensitive. I don't want to make people feel worse than they already do, et cetera, et cetera. But here's the thing. We can't help them if we don't have the full picture. So actually, setting an agenda that addresses, hey, look, I'm going to ask you some questions. Some of them might feel a little bit uncomfortable, but in order to help you understand what is best for you or what to do next, I need to have this information. Setting an agenda also gives us permission to sell. If we do it in the correct way, if we set an agenda in the correct way, it gives us permission to sell. And it actually gets the okay from the client. So you can say things like that, at the end, if it feels right, and only if it feels right, I'm going to tell you how my programs or services might be of use to you. Is that okay? If they say no, then there's a red flag there around being sold to, and you can address that then and there. If they say yes, great, you've got permission. If you go through that sales call and you think you can help them at the end, you know that you're able to share how, you know that you're able to share your services, your programs, and they're going to be fine about it. Okay. We also have to think about the phases that we use on sales calls. So the first is obviously about information gathering. We call it the discovery phase. That's where we find out the key information that we need to know in order to actually understand what their problem is. Like I say, every client will think they know what their problem is. In very few cases will they actually know what their problem is. So we have to spend some time figuring out and troubleshooting, what is it that's actually going wrong for them? Is it the initial problem they think they have, or is there something else that's there that needs to be looked at? The second phase is about pre-objection handling. So again, people often worry about, how do I handle objections? How do I talk about the money objection? How do I, respond when somebody says they need to go and talk to their partner or whatever? Well, here's the thing. If you have a pre-objection handling phase that is designed to find any obstacles or potential objections that they might have, you're going to find that a lot easier because you get to address them in this phase. Simply asking people easy questions like, how would it feel for you to have to move this process forward? Or what are some of the challenges you face in moving this process forward or solving this problem? It brings everything to light, which makes our life a lot easier. We can also, during this pre-objection handling phase, use this to look at our own red flag questions. There are always going to be some people you don't want to work with. For me, it's lazy people. If you're not going to implement, I don't want to work with you. I'm always quite upfront about that because working with me isn't easy. I'm somebody who's very invested in my clients. And whilst that is often marketed as a good thing, I can tell you that to be one of my clients is hard work. I keep track on your results. I want to know what you're doing. I'm on your case if you're not doing the work. That's not for everybody. And so actually asking red flag questions and finding out, how many coaches have you worked before? If they say, I've worked with 10 coaches and all of them were terrible and none of them got me the results that I wanted. Well, guess what? The red flag there is not every single coach you've ever worked with. It's that person. They're the common denominator, right? We have to start seeing these sales calls as a two-way process. It's not one way, it's two-way. You have to want them as a client and they have to want you as a coach. They get to ask questions about you, what it's like working with you. Your job is to be honest and transparent. Equally, your job is also to decide, do I want to work with this person? Is it worth me working with this person? Or are they going to be the person who moans on every call, doesn't show up, doesn't do the work, and then gets on the next call and says, oh, well, I haven't implemented the stuff we talked about last time. And if that's the case, do you want to work with them? Do you want them to be your client? If the answer is no, this phase, this pre-objection handling phase, will give you the ability to decide at the end of this call, do I want to sell to somebody or not? The benefit of doing these two phases, so discovery phase and pre-objection handling, means that by this point, what's happening for you is you're able to decide, A, do I think this person has a problem? B, do I think this person has a problem that I can solve? C, is this person somebody I'd like to work with? From the prospect's perspective, they're thinking, A, this is great. I feel like I'm safe. I can ask questions. I know exactly what's going to happen when. B, I've discovered that my problem is what I initially thought or isn't what I initially thought. C, it's really interesting how much clarity I've got from this call. I wonder what this person would recommend that I do next. That's the important bit. C, I wonder what this person would recommend I do next. So after we've run our discovery phases and our pre-objection handling phases, what usually happens is the client or the prospect is then in their head thinking, yes, I understand I've got this problem. Now I know I need to solve it. How do I get this person to help me? And you'll often find that at this point in the call, like someone will say to you, okay, so how can you help me solve this problem? Or what do you recommend? Or how could I do that? Or how could I do that with you? And that's your invitation then to start telling them about what you think is the best solution. Now, again, this takes away from the kind of common mentality that we have to ask for the sale. If we run this sales call correctly, actually what happens is either the client will say to you, how can I do this with you? And then they will be the one asking for the sale. Or you'll give them a little summary of the conversation so far and say, hey, look, yes, I think I can help you, or no, I don't. Would you like me to tell you more about that? Again, it's permission based. It's asking for permission. Would you like me to tell you more about it? If they say no, cool. That's fine. That is their right as an adult. It's also very unlikely to happen because once we've talked about problems, once we've identified that we want to solve them, we generally want to talk about the solution, how that's going to happen. Okay. So you're not ever at any point asking for the sale. You're not saying, okay, cool, I'm going to tell you now about how I can sell this to you, or I'm going to tell you about my latest program now. You're actively listening. And then at the right point, either they are asking you or you are suggesting to them, would you like me to tell you about how I can help you? Would you like me to discuss the ways that your problem can be solved using X, Y, Z? And then here's the thing, here's the other place where people go wrong, is that when they then get that permission, the person's like, yeah, tell me about it. They don't just stick to one thing. People try and sell everything that they've ever got because they're not confident to sell one solution. Okay. Again, I realize that this is controversial, but as salespeople, our job is to give people the best option that is most likely to fit their need. It is not for us to run them through every single option and expect the client to make the right decision. I'm going to run you through this because I think it's so important and not enough people talk about it. When we're not confident to talk about one solution and the way that that one solution can support the client, and we run them through a bunch of options, we forget that the client has lots and lots of different factors in their head for how they make decisions, right? If they are confused about any of these factors, they just won't buy, right? Confused minds do not buy. So when we present them with multiple options and multiple price points and multiple features and multiple benefits, what happens? Well, we increase the risk that we are confusing the client. And in confusing the client, we know what's going to happen. They're not going to buy. From the person who is selling, from your perspective, there's always a risk. Okay, if I sell this solution, it might be out of their price range. It might be the wrong level of support. It might be that it's too much. It might be that they don't like it. But if we're selling one solution at a time and giving them time to think about why that particular solution meets their need better than anything else, why we're recommending that one, the other points to that conversation, the objections around pricing and things, those can be discussed later. What we have to do initially is present the best solution that is going to get them the transformation that they are actually looking for. That's really, really important. That is their right as a customer to not have their time wasted if you don't feel confident giving them, a solution that is your premium priced solution because you're scared of your own pricing, right? That brings us on to a side note is if you're worried about your pricing and things, you need to be practicing these sales calls a lot more. Everyone needs to be practicing sales calls all of the time. I don't care how good you are at it. I still practice sales calls. I still talk about my pricing to myself in the mirror. I still ask my friends to throw objections at me when we're having like a virtual Zoom wine. It's important to me. It's important to me because it's how I hone my skill, right? It's important to you because it's how you make money in your business. So don't spend like 10 minutes a day on social media until you've spent 10 minutes a day in front of a mirror being like, right, this is my price, and get confident saying your price and say it clearly with no immediate knee-jerk reaction to go, and this is the price, but also there's a special discount today and there's this 20% off thing because you came through my website and da 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 da. That's not selling. That's just apologizing for having to charge for a service. And we don't do that. We don't want to do that. We don't want to make people feel uncomfortable about buying from us. So what we have to do is we always, 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 at the point of sale, we always recommend the best possible solution that is designed to get them the best possible outcome. And then we wait. We talk it through. We focus on benefits rather than features because nobody really cares about the features. Nobody buys from that unless you're buying a TV and you're worried about the tech spec. Like, everybody buys from benefits. So we focus on the benefits, we outline that, we get to the price, we name the price, and we're silent. Let them process the information that they've just heard. I know that some people find silence really awkward. I personally love an uncomfortable silence. I think it's funny. This is why I'm single. But, I think silence is powerful. We know that silence as a sales tool is powerful. We also know in the sales process that the power dynamic shifts regularly or can shift regularly if somebody is not able to sit in silence and let people process information and confidently deliver pricing and things. There are lots and lots of things that shift the power dynamic. So we have to let people process that information. And then if they say that's out of my budget, or they go, oh, I'm not sure that's the right level of support, then we can deal with those objections. But unless we give people the opportunity to process, we don't know necessarily what the real objections are. Because if we're giving them a knee-jerk reaction and an awkward response around our own pricing, they're then going to use that as being the objection why they didn't buy. But really, they're probably not buying because they don't feel confident in you, because you've just waxed lyrical about this program and then been really apologetic about the price that it costs. Right? That makes people feel awkward and nervous and uncomfortable. So we have to start thinking, when we're asking ourselves, how can we ask the sale better? There's not any one thing, it's not about pitching differently. It's not about, you can just adjust one thing you say or one question you ask. You've got to work through this process. And I would advise anyone who's listening to this to start thinking about honestly. You don't have to tell anyone about how your sales calls go. I'm not going to make you do a Sarah and outline every single sales call for the last week and how it went and what you did and exactly the questions you asked. I'm not going to do that to you. You get to do that in your own time. But I would advise you start thinking about it. How am I unselling people if you're not converting at the rate you'd like? And by the way, when we talk about conversion rates, if you're not tracking the successes of your sales calls, then you are missing a massive opportunity. I know it's not nice to have to record every no you get, but we have to know your conversion rates in order to improve them. Without that, there's no way that we can do it, right? So I'd highly, highly recommend that you sit down and you look at the last 3 sales calls you've had, and you just have that question at the top of your mind. How did I unsell them? And look at it. Was it the promotion? Was it even a sales call in the first place? Look at the structure. Did I give them a clear structure? Did I make it transparent? Did I make it easy? And then finally, did I give them clarity? Did I ask them key questions that helped them identify they had a problem? And did I tell them that I could happily solve that problem for them? Was I unapologetic? Was I clear? Did I give them time to process? Did I actually give them the right solution in the first place? If you've done all those things, and you've done them all perfectly, and by the way, I still don't do them perfectly, so I'm not suggesting that anyone else does, but if you've done all those things and you've done them perfectly, then I'll be honest, you're not being honest enough with yourself about how these are running. Because there's always going to be something, and you might think it's a really minor thing, and it probably is a really minor thing, but it doesn't mean you don't need to fix it in order to get better results, right? In this day and age when everyone is fighting really hard to get clients, we're all spending all this time like building our audiences and emailing our list and creating content for social and blah, 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 blah. Why do all of that if we're not going to convert it into sales? It becomes a pointless exercise. So don't make it a pointless exercise. Just spend 10 minutes a day looking at, okay, am I confident in my pricing? Am I saying it confidently? Am I able to clearly explain the benefits and features of my offers? Am I, happy to sit on sales calls? Am I happy to answer objections and handle them correctly? And if you're not and you need further training, like honestly, I don't plug my stuff that often. Well, I do actually. That's a bit of a lie, isn't it? I'm always plugging my stuff. My stuff's great. Like, buy more of it. Woohoo! But obviously, I don't sell that much these days for people who are in the B2C space. The sales scripts and objection handling guides are something I've created and that have been incredible and have helped so many people over the last few years to absolutely nail their sales calls. It outlines every step of the agenda, how you set it, how to make it feel easy, how to make it feel bright and breezy for the prospect, how to run the correct discovery phase and pre-objection handling phases, including the questions that you want to be asking, how to identify the clear red flags that come up, making sure that you've got the information you need to be able to present the right solution. And then it walks you through that summary and pitch phase and how you can do it in a way that feels good for you and good for the client, that allows them clear processing time, that makes their life feel easy and makes them want to buy on that call and pay you on that call, so that you can get them set up for success, so that you can start converting more sales calls of your own, and so ultimately you can start making the impact that you want to make. Like I say, link for it is in the show notes, but do I think it is the best resource out there for anyone struggling with sales calls? 100% yes. Yes, it's a relatively small investment. It's under £100. And it's honestly the best thing that you'll ever buy in terms of sales calls and in terms of giving you more confidence and more competence. It is the best ever. So if you are interested in that, go grab it. It's in the show notes. It really is a great training. I will be back next week. I'm excited. Next week, we've got how to map your day in order to make more money, which I'm very excited about. And then we're rounding off June with a special guest episode, which is also going to be excellent and very exciting. There's lots of E words here, so see if you can guess who the guest is going to be. Their name begins with E. I was trying to get that point across in the adjectives, but it was a cheesy dad joke moment. I will see you next week. Like I say, as always, any questions, give me a shout. I'll see you soon.